We're going to turn our attention now back to foreign and security policy. Joining me is Professor Paul Dibb. He's from the Strategic and Defence Studies Centre at ANU. Professor Dibb, thanks for your time. The Prime Minister heading on Sunday to the NATO summit in Madrid next week. Do you think it's important for him to attend, with talks set to be dominated by Ukraine particularly?
I think it obviously is. It's going to be a huge summit, something like 37 members of NATO, the Prime Minister of Japan, the Prime Minister of South Korea, and I think senior observers from Sweden and Finland, who, as you know, are applying to join NATO. The trick will be not to be overawed by all this and to make too many commitments. My central concern would be, of course, Prime Minister Albanese can make strong diplomatic commitments of our strongest kind, and he can, if asked, look to see if we can provide more military equipment, such as, for instance, the Bushmaster troop carrier. Whether that means reopening production lines, I don't know. But you need to understand that with missiles, we don't make any in Australia, and our stockpiles are based on peacetime. The final issue that I want to stress is I want the Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister and the Defence Minister to have at the centre of their minds the most important defence issue we now face is our region of immediate strategic concern, which goes from the Northeast Indian Ocean through to the entirety of Southeast Asia, including the South China Sea, plus the South Pacific, plus the Southern Ocean waters. That's about 20% of the Earth's surface. And that must be central, absolutely central, to their minds when it comes to defence policy. Why? Because, as you've seen, both to the east and the north, China is currently challenging our predominance in that primary region of strategic concern.
They certainly are. And it seems that it's very much got NATO's attention, with NATO inviting Australia, but a number of other of our neighbours to this summit next week. And is it largely driven by that point that you make there about China's assertiveness and aggression?
I think at long last, the Europeans are waking up to Chinese pressure. Of course, their primary concern is whether the Russian invasion of Ukraine spreads to be a major general European-wide war. One hopes it isn't, but the risk is there. I think the caution I have in my mind is the Ukrainian ambassador here, I met with him this week, is a fine ambassador, but he's made the point, including in the Financial Review in the last several days, that if any country in the Asia-Pacific region is attacked, including Australia, NATO would come to our assistance. I think we have to be very sceptical about that. You and I know that where were the Europeans in the Second World War after Britain was defeated by Japan in Singapore? Where were the Europeans in the Vietnam War? Where were the Europeans in the Malayan emergency? And where were the Europeans in our confrontation with Indonesia in the mid-1960s, which caused us, by the way, to order the F-111 strike bombers and the Oberon-class submarines? Look, maybe I'm too sceptical about this, and let me, as a final word, seeing that I was born in the UK, you and I remember East of Suez, don't we?
Mm. Yeah, well, that's the point. And I guess with us engaging with NATO, and your point to the Prime Minister and the Defence Minister and others is don't lose sight of our main game, particularly in the region. I want to ask you about that incident recently with the Chinese fighter jet and our surveillance plane. It was a dangerous interception. We now know that there was another soon after surveillance mission launched by one of our aircraft. What does that tell you? Does it say that our military were not deterred despite the dangerous incident there in the South China Sea?
And they shouldn't be deterred. My understanding is that the P8 waters in the South China Sea that means it's entirely with international law for us to undertake reconnaissance and indeed intelligence collection measures. You've seen the Chinese do that with an intelligence collection ship immediately off Northwest Cape, which is our primary submarine communication facility. The problem is that the Chinese, unlike the former Soviet Union, by the way, the former Soviet Union had an avoidance of collisions of warships at sea agreement with America, and it got a bit rough on times, but by and large it was agreed to. And secondly, there was an avoidance of air incidents. And in fact, America has such a sort of arrangement with China, which Barack Obama signed with the then Chinese premier. But it's obvious to me the Chinese have no background in this. And when you're starting to fire flares from a jet fighter and chaff, which could have jammed up the engines, that could, result in a catastrophe. And you need to remember that I think it was 10 years ago, there was an American P-3C Orion. We used to have some of those, doing intelligence collection and reconnaissance in the 200 nautical mile exclusive economic zone of China. And it was just off the coastline of China. At that time, the Chinese sent up a fighter aircraft. It collided with the P-3. The Chinese fighter crashed and the pilot was killed. And the P-3 American plane had to be brought down into an urgent landing on a Chinese airport. And as that was happening, by the way, the crew were rapidly destroying and shredding the code books.
Yeah, right. Professor Paul Dibb, thank you for that, a bit of history and also your analysis, as always. Thank you, Paul Dibb from the ANU Strategic and Defence Studies Centre.